Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the wildly unlikely, rocky, and absolutely fascinating story of how the world's biggest sporting event came to be. You know, when we watch the beautiful game today, it feels like this permanent, inevitable fixture of our global culture. But the truth is, the origins of this tournament are rooted in a massive gamble, a treacherous transatlantic voyage, and a frantic scramble to build a colossal stadium in record time. So we're going to explore the history of the World Cup, focusing specifically on the unbelievable origin of the competition. Let's get into it. Today, the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the modern tournament is undeniable. Over 3 billion television viewers worldwide, we're talking nearly half the planet here, tuned into the recent spectacle of the World Cup. It's a tournament where the prize pool for the 2022 edition reached a staggering $440 million, with the winning team alone walking away with $42 million. It is without a doubt the undisputed king of global sporting events.
But with all those billions of dollars, the massive global broadcast deals, and the slick, modern stadium polish, we really have to ask ourselves, how did this massive global phenomenon originally start out? How did a sport that was still kind of finding its footing on the international stage in the early 20th century manage to pull off a tournament that would eventually captivate the entire globe?
To understand the origins, we have to flip back through history. The governing body, FIFA, was founded back in 1904. But it wasn't until a visionary French executive named Jules Rimet took the reins as president in 1921 that the wheels truly began to turn. Rimet had this deep, audacious belief that sport, and football in particular, could serve as a powerful vehicle to unite people across social, cultural, and political divides. Before an independent World Cup ever existed, international football was mostly confined to the Summer Olympics. And while the Olympic tournaments of the 1920s, especially in 1924 and 1928, were wildly successful, they posed a massive problem for the growing sport. The International Olympic Committee, led by Pierre de Coubertin, viewed football primarily as an amateur spectacle, which completely clashed with the reality of where football was actually heading.
See, football was rapidly transitioning to professionalism. But the strict amateur rules of the Olympics were literally holding back the sport's greatest players from competing globally. The breaking point actually came when the Olympic Committee decided to drop football entirely from the upcoming 1932 Games in Los Angeles because of this ongoing, bitter dispute over amateur status. FIFA realized that if they wanted to find the true champion of the world, they had to create their own stage.
And that brings us to Jules Rimet's master plan. In May 1928, at the FIFA Congress in Amsterdam, the official and historic decision was made. FIFA would hold an independent World Cup tournament in 1930, open to all member nations, regardless of whether their players were true amateurs or well-paid professionals. The dream was finally set in motion. But almost immediately, they faced a massive hurdle. Where on earth were they going to host the thing? Now, you might be wondering why a European powerhouse wasn't selected right out of the gate. After all, the United Kingdom was the ancestral birthplace of football, and several European nations, including Italy, Sweden, and Spain, initially wanted to bid. So why did Uruguay, a relatively small nation in South America, end up being given the inaugural hosting honors at the 1929 FIFA Congress in Barcelona? Well, Uruguay brought an ultimate trump card to the table. First off, they were undeniably the best team on the planet, having just won back-to-back Olympic gold medals. Second, 1930 marked the 100th anniversary of their first constitution, making this a matter of immense national pride. But the real clincher? Their booming economy allowed them to offer something totally unprecedented. They promised to pay the travel and hotel expenses for every single competing team, plus build a brand new stadium. Meanwhile, Europe was reeling financially from the 1929 stock market crash. Despite Uruguay's incredibly generous offer to foot the bill, it was still a massive gamble. The cost in sheer time was daunting. I mean, in 1930, you couldn't just hop on a quick flight. It required a long, exhausting ocean voyage across the Atlantic. For a while, it looked like no European teams would show up at all. Rimet had to personally persuade nations to participate. Ultimately, only 4 European teams, France, Belgium, Romania, and Yugoslavia, made the trip to join the 13-team inaugural invitational. 3 of those European teams even traveled together on the exact same ship, the Conte Verde, right alongside Jules Rimet himself. Meanwhile, back in Montevideo, Uruguay was facing a frantic race against the clock. Shortly after winning the bid in May 1929, they had barely a year to construct a monumental venue capable of hosting the world. They named it the Estadio Centenario, as a tribute to their Constitution's centennial. The city donated the land, and a local architect named Juan Antonio Scasso took charge of this incredibly ambitious, oval-shaped design.
The sheer scale of this project was staggering. This wasn't just some grandstand. It was an architectural marvel built in record time. We're talking 160,000 cubic meters of soil moved and 14,000 cubic meters of concrete poured. Because the schedule was so unforgiving, and with heavy rains delaying progress, they actually had to implement a 3-shift system, working 24 hours a day continuously. It's really fascinating to note that this incredible feat was heavily supported by the large numbers of European immigrants arriving in Uruguay at the time.
The schedule was so wildly tight that the stadium wasn't actually ready for the very first matches of the tournament. They had to be played at smaller nearby venues. It was an absolute photo finish. Get this, they were literally using heaters to dry the concrete floors just a single day before the stadium's official inauguration. But against all odds, they made it. On July 18, 1930, exactly on their Constitution's 100th anniversary, the Centenario opened its doors to nearly 60,000 spectators as Uruguay defeated Peru. Uruguay would ultimately go on to win the whole tournament, beating Argentina 4-2 in the final.
Okay, let's pivot for a second and dive into the hardware itself. Because the physical prize these nations were fighting for has an unbelievable history of its own. It's not just a cup. It's a symbol of international supremacy that has been fiercely guarded, hidden, and even stolen over the decades. It seriously sounds like the plot of a heist movie. The evolution of the ultimate prize is a wild story. The original trophy, eventually named the Jules Rimet Trophy, featured Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, and was crafted from gold-plated sterling silver on a lapis lazuli base. After Brazil won it for the third time in 1970, they actually got to keep it forever. Though tragically, it was stolen in Brazil in 1983 and has never been recovered. On the flip side, the replacement introduced in 1974 is the current FIFA World Cup trophy. Made of solid 18-karat gold with malachite bands, it depicts human figures holding the earth. It's a masterpiece that cost almost $250,000 to produce. And today, only a very select few, like winning players and heads of state, are legally allowed to touch it with their bare hands.
But honestly, the survival of that original Jules Rimet trophy during its lifespan is a miracle in itself. During the dark days of World War II, the tournament was forced into a 12-year hiatus. The trophy was being held by Italy, who had won the 1938 tournament. Ottorino Barassi, the Italian vice president of FIFA, realized the trophy was in grave danger. So he secretly transported the golden prize from a bank vault in Rome and literally hid it in a shoebox under his bed for years, just to ensure the Nazis wouldn't confiscate it. Unbelievable, right? Surviving global conflicts, massive boycotts, and immense logistical hurdles, Jules Rimet's scrappy, incredibly ambitious dream somehow survived. The tournament resumed in 1950 in Brazil, picking right back up where it left off, and from there it began to expand into an absolute juggernaut. This was largely fueled by the advent of television broadcasts and the unstoppable growing global love for the sport.
And the explosive growth of the tournament across the decades is just breathtaking. What started as a small 13-team invitational requiring a multi-week boat ride quickly formalized into 16 teams. By 1982 in Spain, it expanded to 24. By 1998 in France, it grew to the 32-team format most of us grew up with. And looking ahead to 2026 across Canada, Mexico, and the United States, it becomes a massive 48-team qualification gauntlet with 104 matches. The sheer scale of growth is just immense.
Ultimately, the foundation matters. Every single time you watch modern superstars lift that 18-karat golden trophy under the bright stadium lights, you are directly participating in a century-old vision. A vision that started with Jules Rimet's unshakable belief in sports uniting the world and was made physically possible by a tiny, determined South American nation that was willing to foot the bill and build a 60,000-seat stadium in less than a year.
I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. We've seen how this tournament survived world wars, stadium crunches, and 12-year hiatuses to become a multi-billion-dollar cultural touchstone. As the competition pushes its boundaries to include 48 nations across multiple continents, what would Jules Rimet think of his amateur-defined gamble today? How far will the unifying power of this beautiful game continue to stretch into the future? Thank you so much for exploring the incredible origins of the World Cup with me today. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.